Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sun cast its golden glow over the bustling streets of Lagos, painting the city in hues of ambition and chaos. It was a city of contradictions, where wealth and poverty lived as next-door neighbors, and hope danced alongside despair. In the heart of the city, Tade Olumide sat in his glass-walled office on the 25th floor of the Olumide Group headquarters, a beacon of success that towered over the cityscape. Tade was the epitome of modern African success. At 38, he was a self-made billionaire with an empire that spanned real estate, technology, and logistics. His name was synonymous with wealth, power, and influence. Yet, behind the tailored suits and the charm that lit up social circles, Tade carried the invisible weight of a broken past. Across from him sat Temi, a woman who had become the city's latest obsession. Temi was a vision, slender with flawless ebony skin that shimmered under the office lights. Her soft-spoken demeanor and carefully curated public image had captured the hearts of many. She was everything the tabloids loved: beautiful, mysterious, and the perfect accessory to a man like Tade. "Do you like it?" Temi asked, holding up the diamond-studded bracelet she had just unwrapped, a gift Tade had arranged to be delivered to her earlier that morning. Tade smiled, though the gesture didn't reach his eyes. "It's nothing but a token, Temi. You deserve more." Temi leaned across the desk, her perfectly manicured nails glinting. "You always know how to spoil me." Tade nodded, distracted. He glanced out of the window, his mind wandering to a place he had tried desperately to bury, a place where the name Aisha lingered like a ghost. His ex-wife. A world apart. On the other side of Lagos, Aisha Yousef adjusted the white apron around her swollen belly. The uniform felt foreign on her body, a stark contrast to the tailored dresses she had once worn as the wife of a wealthy CEO. The mansion where she worked as a maid was a world she had once belonged to, but now it felt like a distant dream. "Madam Aisha, please bring the tea to the study," the housekeeper instructed. "Yes, ma," Aisha replied, keeping her head low as she carefully balanced the silver tray. She had learned to move quietly, to blend into the background like the wallpaper. But every step she took reminded her of how far she had fallen. The once vibrant woman with a university degree and dreams of starting her own NGO now found herself at the mercy of others. Yet, Aisha was not bitter. She had made her choices, and she would live with them. What mattered most now was the life growing inside her. Her baby was her anchor, her hope, her reason to keep moving forward. A chance meeting. That evening, Tate attended a charity gala at the Eco Hotel. Temi was at his side, dazzling in a sequined gown that clung to her like a second skin. Cameras flashed as they walked the red carpet, the perfect power couple. Inside the opulent ballroom, Tate mingled with other elite figures, but his mind was elsewhere. He barely noticed Temi slipping away to chat with a group of influencers. Instead, his eyes roamed the room, searching for something, or someone, he couldn't name. Across the city, Aisha worked late into the night, scrubbing floors and polishing chandeliers in preparation for her employer's return from an overseas trip. She was tired, but she refused to complain. Every naira she earned was a step closer to a new life for her child. As the clock struck midnight, Aisha stepped out of the mansion for a moment to catch her breath. The cool night air kissed her face, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to exhale. She looked up at the stars, whispering a silent prayer for strength. The burden of appearances. Back at the gala, Temi returned to Tade's side, her lips painted in a smile that hid her true feelings. While the world saw her as the devoted girlfriend of a billionaire, she was constantly calculating, strategizing her next move. She knew Tade was still haunted by his past, but she had no intention of letting that ruin her plans. "Tade," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm, "let's dance?" Tade hesitated but eventually allowed her to lead him to the dance floor. As they swayed to the soft music, he found himself thinking about Aisha again. He hadn't seen her in over a year, not since their divorce was finalized. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase her from his mind. "What's wrong?" Temi asked, sensing his distraction. "Nothing," he replied, forcing a smile. But the truth was, his heart felt heavy, burdened by guilt and unresolved feelings. Foreshadowing the unraveling. The night ended with Tade and Temi retreating to his penthouse, where the city lights glittered like a sea of diamonds. As Temi slept beside him, Tade stared at the ceiling, his mind replaying memories of Aisha. The way she used to laugh, the way she used to challenge him, the way she had always believed in him. He had thought he could move on, that a new relationship would help him forget. But deep down, he knew the truth. Aisha was still a part of him, and no amount of wealth or new beginnings could change that. Meanwhile, in a modest room at the back of the mansion, Aisha lay awake, her hand resting on her belly. She didn't know what the future held, but she made a vow to herself and her unborn child. They would rise above this, no matter what. Little did either of them know that their worlds were about to collide in a way that would change everything. The streets of Lagos pulsed with life as the morning sun bathed the city in light. In the Olumide Group headquarters, Tade Olumide sat in his office, brooding. The lavish gala from the night before had done little to distract him. Memories of Aisha flooded his mind, her laugh, her strength, and the way she had believed in his dreams when no one else did. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out an old photograph. It was taken during the early years of their marriage. Aisha stood beside him in a simple ochre dress, her radiant smile contrasting with his stiff suit. They had been happy then, unburdened by the weight of expectations and the relentless pursuit of success. But success had come at a cost. Flashbacks to a love lost. Tade and Aisha had met during their university days at the University of Ibadan. Aisha was studying sociology, with dreams of starting an NGO to help underprivileged women. Tade, a business administration student, was full of ambition but lacked direction. It was Aisha who had inspired him, pushing him to take risks and believe in himself. Their love story had been a whirlwind. They married shortly after graduation, pooling their limited resources to start a small logistics company. Aisha worked tirelessly, juggling the roles of wife, business partner, and moral compass. Together, they built the foundation of what would later become the Olumide Group. But as the business grew, so did Tade's hunger for power and recognition. Late nights at the office turned into trips abroad. Meetings with investors became more important than family dinners. Aisha, once his anchor, became a distant figure in his life. The breaking point came when Tade had an affair with a high-profile businesswoman. Aisha found out, and though she tried to forgive him for the sake of their marriage, the betrayal proved too deep. The final blow came when Tate accused her of being too ordinary to stand by his side in the world he now inhabited. Devastated, Aisha walked away. Temi's web of deceit. In the present, Temi Adebayo sat in her penthouse apartment, scrolling through her phone. Her social media accounts were flooded with praise from fans and gossip blogs, all admiring her as the perfect match for Tade Olumide. But Temi knew the truth. Born into a modest family in Ibadan, Temi had always been determined to escape poverty. She was intelligent and ambitious, but the opportunities were limited. After graduating with a degree in mass communication, she had worked briefly as a journalist before realizing that the real power lay in wealth and influence. Temi had carefully crafted her persona to appeal to men like Tade, charming, cultured, and seemingly perfect. She had met him at a networking event, where she played the role of an innocent admirer. Over time, she had wormed her way into his life, always presenting herself as the supportive, glamorous girlfriend. But beneath the surface, Temi was calculating. She saw Tate not as a partner but as a stepping stone. She had her eyes set on more than just being a billionaire's girlfriend. She wanted to secure her future, no matter the cost. Aisha's struggles. Meanwhile, Aisha's days were filled with hard work. The mansion she worked in belonged to the Adebanjos, a wealthy family known for their ostentatious lifestyle. Despite the long hours and physical strain, Aisha remained resolute. She had made peace with her situation, choosing to focus on the life growing inside her. One afternoon, as she cleaned the grand staircase, she overheard the Adebanjo children talking about an upcoming party. "Uncle Tate is coming," one of them said. The name froze Aisha in her tracks. Tate? Could it be him? Her heart raced as she tried to dismiss the thought. Lagos was a big city, after all. It could be another Tate. Still, the possibility lingered, and with it came a flood of emotions, anger, sadness, and an ache she thought she had buried long ago. The cracks in Tade's empire. At the Olumide group, trouble was brewing. Unbeknownst to Tade, several of his senior managers were involved in questionable deals. A construction project in Lekki, which had been one of his company's flagship ventures, was under scrutiny for mismanagement of funds. Temi, who had been involved in the project as a consultant, had pocketed a hefty sum through inflated invoices. She was careful to cover her tracks, ensuring that all fingers would point elsewhere if things went wrong. Tade, preoccupied with his personal struggles, was oblivious to the brewing storm. But whispers were beginning to circulate in the business world, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks became impossible to ignore. Fate brings them closer. One evening, Aisha was sent to the market to buy fresh ingredients for a dinner party the Adebanjos were hosting. As she navigated the crowded stalls, her mind wandered. She thought about her unborn child and the kind of life she wanted to provide. She vowed to save every kobo she earned, no matter how long it took. At the same time, Tate found himself driving through the city after a long day at work. Feeling restless, he decided to take a detour through the bustling streets of Ikoyi, a place he rarely visited anymore. As his car inched forward in the traffic, his eyes scanned the roadside stalls and vendors. Then he saw her. Aisha. She was haggling with a vegetable seller, her face tired but determined. Tade's heart stopped. It couldn't be her. What was she doing here? Why wasn't she living the comfortable life he had always assumed she would have after their divorce? Before he could process what he was seeing, the traffic began to move, and his driver accelerated. Tade craned his neck, trying to catch another glimpse of her, but she was already lost in the crowd. The weight of revelation. That night, Tate couldn't sleep. The image of Aisha, standing in the market with her pregnant belly, haunted him. Questions swirled in his mind. Was the baby his? Why hadn't she reached out? And why was she working as a maid when she deserved so much more? Temi noticed his unease. "What's wrong?" she asked, placing a hand on his arm. "Nothing," he replied, his tone curt. But it wasn't nothing. Seeing Aisha had awakened something in him, a sense of guilt, regret, and an undeniable longing to know the truth. As the city slept, Tate made a decision. He needed to find Aisha. He needed answers. And, perhaps, he needed redemption. The crisp morning breeze swept through Lagos, carrying with it the promise of yet another day of relentless hustle. Tade Olumide sat at the dining table of his penthouse, nursing a cup of coffee, his mind replaying the image of Aisha in the market. He had barely slept, haunted by questions and memories. The confident CEO, who once prided himself on having everything under control, now felt unmoored. "Sir, your 10 a.m. meeting has been rescheduled," his assistant, Femi, informed him over the phone. "Cancel all my appointments for the day," Tade replied curtly, already standing and grabbing his car keys. He had made up his mind. He would find Aisha. Aisha's day begins. At the Adebanjo mansion, Aisha woke early as usual. The mornings were her favorite time of day, the quiet moments before the rest of the household stirred. She placed a hand on her growing belly, whispering a silent prayer for strength and guidance. "Today will be a good day," she murmured to herself. As she prepared breakfast in the grand kitchen, her thoughts drifted to the party that was to be hosted later that evening. The Adebanjos had insisted on an extravagant affair, complete with live music and a guest list filled with Lagos's elite. Aisha didn't mind the extra work. She welcomed anything that distracted her from the gnawing emptiness she felt at times. Tade's search. Tade's black SUV weaved through the streets of Lagos as he retraced the route he had taken the previous evening. The marketplace loomed ahead, alive with activity. Vendors called out their wares, and the air was thick with the scent of spices and roasted corn. Tate stepped out of the car, his tailored suit and polished shoes out of place in the chaotic surroundings. He scanned the crowd, searching for the familiar face that had shaken him to his core. "Excuse me," he asked a nearby vendor, showing her a photo of Aisha that he had saved from years ago. "Have you seen this woman?" The vendor squinted at the picture. I don't know, but you can ask Mama Tund over there. She knows everybody." Tate thanked her and moved toward an elderly woman selling vegetables under a wide umbrella. "Good morning, Ma," he began. "I'm looking for someone. She was here yesterday." Mama Tund looked him up and down, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "Who are you looking for, Oga?" "Aisha Yousef. She's pregnant and—" Aisha," the woman interrupted. "She comes here sometimes. She works for one big family in Ikoyi, the Adabanjos. If you want to see her, you'll find her there." Tate froze. The Adabanjos were prominent figures in Lagos's social scene, and he had met them on several occasions. The idea of Aisha working for them, as a maid no less, was difficult to reconcile with the woman he had once known. "Thank you, Ma," he said, handing her a few naira notes before returning to his car. He now had a new destination. The party preparations. At the Adebanjo mansion, Aisha was busy overseeing the final touches for the party. She moved with purpose, her apron tied neatly around her waist as she directed the other staff. "Please make sure the glasses are polished. Madam doesn't like streaks," she instructed a younger maid. As she worked, she felt the weight of her pregnancy slowing her down, but she refused to let it show. She had learned to endure, to keep pushing forward no matter the circumstances. The clock struck 5 p.m., and the first guests began to arrive. Aisha retreated to the kitchen, knowing her presence would not be welcomed in the main hall. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes for a moment of respite. A sudden collision. Tate arrived at the mansion just as the party was in full swing. The driveway was filled with luxury cars, and the sound of music spilled out into the night air. He hesitated at the entrance, unsure of how to proceed. He spotted a waiter carrying a tray of drinks and called him over. "Excuse me, does Aisha work here?" The waiter looked confused. "Aisha? Oh, you mean the pregnant one? She's in the kitchen." Tate's heart raced. He walked through the grand entrance, his presence going unnoticed amid the crowd of glamorous guests. He followed the waiter's directions, weaving through the maze of corridors until he reached the kitchen. And there she was. Aisha stood by the sink, her back to him, her hands submerged in soapy water. The sight of her, so familiar yet so different, took his breath away. He opened his mouth to speak but found no words. Sensing someone behind her, Aisha turned. Her eyes widened in shock, and the plate she had been holding slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. "Tade," she whispered, disbelief etched across her face. The weight of the moment. The kitchen fell silent, the noise of the party a distant hum. Aisha's mind raced as she tried to process the man standing before her. He looked the same yet different, older, wearier, but still the man she had once loved. "What are you doing here?" she finally managed to ask, her voice tinged with both anger and confusion. "I had to find you," Tade replied, his voice soft. "I saw you yesterday at the market." Aisha's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "You shouldn't be here," she said firmly, turning away from him. "Aisha, please. I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, her tone hardening. "You made your choice, Tade. You left." Tade stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I didn't know. About the baby. About your struggles. If I had." "But you didn't," Aisha interrupted, her anger bubbling to the surface. "You didn't care enough to stay. You didn't care enough to check on me." "I was wrong," Tate admitted. "I was selfish. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." Aisha shook her head, her hands trembling. "It's too late, Tade. I've moved on. I don't need you." The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation, and Aisha quickly turned away, wiping her tears. A guest had wandered into the kitchen, looking for a drink. Tade took the hint and stepped back, but his eyes remained fixed on Aisha. "This isn't over," he said quietly before leaving. Unresolved emotions. As the night wore on, Aisha struggled to focus on her duties. Her encounter with Tade had reopened wounds she thought had healed. She felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a lingering ache that she couldn't shake. Tade, meanwhile, returned to his car, his mind racing. Seeing Aisha had stirred something in him, a determination to make amends. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't ready to give up. Both of them lay awake that night, the echoes of their past and the uncertainty of their future weighing heavily on their hearts. Lagos awoke to the familiar hum of activity, its streets alive with the hustle of a city that never paused. For Tade Olumide, the morning brought no relief from the restless thoughts that had plagued him throughout the night. His encounter with Aisha had ignited a fire within him, a deep yearning to right his wrongs and uncover the truths she seemed so determined to bury. Sitting in his office, Tate stared out of the window, the sprawling cityscape offering little solace. His assistant, Temi, walked in hesitantly. "Sir, about the Ade Banjo project review," Temi began. Tate raised a hand to stop him. "Postpone it. I have personal matters to attend to." Temi frowned but nodded, stepping out of the room. Tate leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He knew his actions were risky. Temi, the board, even the media would question his focus. But for the first time in years, Tate didn't care about appearances. He cared about Aisha. Aisha faces her fears. At the Ade Banjo mansion, Aisha moved through her morning tasks with mechanical precision. Her encounter with Tate the night before had shaken her, and no amount of deep breathing could steady her racing heart. She hadn't expected to see him again, and certainly not in the place she now called work. "You're distracted today," said Yemi, one of the younger maids, as they polished the dining room table. "I'm fine," Aisha replied quickly, though her trembling hands betrayed her. Yemi hesitated but didn't press further. Aisha appreciated the silence. She didn't want to explain the tangled web of emotions that Tade's return had triggered. By afternoon, Aisha's resolve began to falter. She couldn't shake the fear that Tade's presence would disrupt the fragile stability she had worked so hard to build. Her baby, her anchor, deserved better than the chaos of her past. Temi's suspicions. In her luxury apartment, Temi scrolled through social media, her perfectly arched brows furrowing. Something was off with Tade. He had been distant lately, his mind elsewhere during their conversations, and the flowers he typically sent had stopped arriving. Temi's carefully constructed facade of the perfect girlfriend was starting to crack. Determined to uncover the truth, Temi called one of her acquaintances, a journalist known for his discretion and knack for digging up dirt. "I need you to look into someone," she said, her tone cold. "A woman named Aisha Yousef. I want everything you can find on her." The journalist hesitated. "Aisha Yousef? That's a common name. Anything specific?" "She's pregnant," Temi added, her voice laced with venom. "And somehow, she's connected to Tade." Tade's apology. Later that day, Tade found himself outside the Ade Banjo mansion once again. His presence at their extravagant party had gone unnoticed by the hosts, but he knew he couldn't keep slipping in and out of their home without raising suspicion. This time, he opted for a direct approach. The head housekeeper, Madame Beezy, opened the door. Her stern expression softened when she recognized Tade. "Good afternoon, sir. Are you here for the Ade Banjos?" "No," Tade replied. "I'm here to see Aisha Yousef." Madame Beezy's brow furrowed. "Aisha? She's working right now." "Please, Madame Beezy. Just 5 minutes," Tade pleaded. After a long pause, Madame Beezy relented. "Wait here." A few moments later, Aisha emerged, her expression wary. She crossed her arms over her chest, her posture defensive. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low. "I came to apologize," Tate began. "For everything. For leaving, for not being there when you needed me most. I was wrong, Aisha. I see that now." Aisha's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she quickly looked away. "Your apology doesn't change anything, Tate. My life is different now." "It doesn't have to be," Tate insisted. "Let me help you." "Let me—" "No," Aisha interrupted, her voice firm. "I don't need your pity or your money. I've made my peace with the past. You should do the same." Before Tate could respond, Aisha turned and walked back inside, leaving him standing alone on the grand front steps. Aisha's secret. That evening, Aisha sat alone in her small room at the back of the mansion. Her hands rested on her belly as she whispered to her unborn child. "Your father doesn't know," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. "And maybe it's better that way." A knock at the door startled her. It was Yemi, holding a steaming cup of tea. "You looked like you needed this," Yemi said with a kind smile. Aisha nodded her thanks but said nothing. She couldn't bring herself to confide in anyone, not even Yemi, who had become something of a friend. The weight of her secret was hers to bear alone. Temi's plan. Meanwhile, Temi received a text from the journalist. Attached was a file containing everything he had uncovered about Aisha Yousef. Temi's eyes narrowed as she scanned the information. Aisha's divorce, her financial struggles, and most damning of all, her pregnancy. "She thinks she can come back into Tade's life," Temi muttered under her breath. "Not on my watch." That night, Temi began crafting a plan. She would ensure that Aisha stayed far away from Tade, and she wasn't above using underhanded tactics to achieve her goal. Tade learns the truth. Days later, Tade received a surprise visitor at his office, Madame Beezy. She entered hesitantly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Olumide, I think you should know something," she began. "What is it?" Tade asked, his heart pounding. "It's about Aisha," Madame Beezy said. "The baby she's carrying, that's yours." The words hit Tade like a freight train. He leaned back in his chair, struggling to process the revelation. "She never told you?" Madame Beezy asked. Tade shook his head, his mind racing. "Oh, she didn't?" Madame Beezy sighed. "She's been through a lot, Mr. Olumide. Maybe she thought it was better this way. But you deserve to know." Tade nodded, his jaw tightening with determination. "Thank you, Madame Beezy. I'll handle it from here." The tables begin to turn. Armed with the truth, Tade knew he couldn't let Aisha push him away any longer. His child deserved better. Aisha deserved better. And for the first time in years, Tade felt a glimmer of hope that redemption might still be within his grasp. But as Tade prepared to confront Aisha, he had no idea that Temi's plan was already in motion, and that the fallout would threaten to destroy everything he held dear. The sun rose over Lagos, casting its golden light on a city brimming with both hope and despair. For Tade Olumide, this morning felt different. His mind was resolute, his heart steady. The truth had been revealed. Aisha was carrying his child, and he was determined to make things right. No more hesitation. No more running. But he wasn't the only one preparing for the day. Temi, with her carefully laid plans, had decided that this was the moment to strike. Temi's final move. Temi sat at her vanity, applying the last touches of her makeup. The reflection staring back at her was poised, composed, but underneath her flawless exterior burned a fire of anger and fear. Tade had been distant, and Aisha's name had begun to linger too long in his thoughts. Temi wasn't about to let anyone take her place. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the journalist she had hired. "The information you requested has been delivered to key media outlets. Expect results by evening." Temi smiled coldly. The media storm she had orchestrated would ensure Aisha's reputation was ruined. No one would sympathize with a pregnant maid who had allegedly schemed to trap a billionaire. Aisha confronts the chaos. By midday, the Adebanjo mansion was abuzz with whispers. Aisha stepped into the kitchen, confused by the furtive glances and hushed tones of the staff. Yemi, ever loyal, pulled her aside. "Aisha, have you seen this?" Yemi asked, holding out her phone. Aisha's heart sank as she read the headline. "Pregnant maid claims billionaire CEO as baby's father in scandalous plot." The article was filled with half-truths and outright lies, painting her as a gold digger who had intentionally sought out Tate to secure a future of wealth and luxury. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments. The internet was merciless. Strangers were calling her names, questioning her character, and even mocking her unborn child. "Who would do this?" Aisha whispered, her voice cracking. Yemi hesitated but eventually said, "I don't know, but you need to talk to Mr. Olumide. He's the only one who can fix this. Aisha shook her head, tears streaming down her face. He's the reason I'm in this mess. I told him to stay away. Tate takes control. Across the city, Tate's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages. His public relations team had alerted him to the scandal, urging him to issue a statement. But Tate wasn't interested in damage control. He was focused on finding Aisha. He arrived at the Adebanjo mansion unannounced, his expression stormy. Madame Beezy met him at the door, her face a mix of concern and pity. She's in her room, Madame Beezy said softly. Tate marched down the corridor, his resolve unwavering. He knocked once before stepping inside. Aisha sat on the edge of her bed, her face buried in her hands. She looked up as he entered, her eyes red from crying. Get out, she said, her voice hoarse. Aisha, I'm not leaving, Tate replied firmly. Not until we talk. There's nothing to talk about, she snapped. This is your fault. I told you to leave me alone, and now look at what's happened. Tate knelt in front of her, his voice softening. I didn't do this, Aisha. But I will fix it. I promise you. How? Aisha asked, her tone bitter. You think you can wave your money around and make this go away? My reputation is ruined, Tate. My child, our child, will grow up under the shadow of this scandal. Tate reached for her hands, but she pulled away. I made mistakes, he admitted. I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I won't let this be the end of your story. Or mine. Or our child's. Aisha stared at him, her defenses beginning to waver. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I'm going to tell the truth, Tate said. To everyone. The press conference. By evening, Tate had arranged a press conference at the Olumide Group headquarters. The media swarmed the building, eager for answers. Temi watched from the sidelines, her confidence faltering as she realized Tate had taken control of the narrative. Tate stood at the podium, his expression grave. Cameras flashed as he began to speak. I want to address the rumors circulating about Aisha Yousef, he said. First, let me make one thing clear. Aisha is not a gold digger. She is a strong, independent woman who has faced unimaginable challenges with grace and dignity. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. Yes, Aisha is carrying my child. But she never sought me out. If anything, I failed her. I let her down when she needed me most, and for that, I take full responsibility. The room buzzed with murmurs, but Tate's voice remained steady. I won't stand by while her name is dragged through the mud. Aisha deserves better. My child deserves better. And I will do everything in my power to protect them. Temi's downfall. In the days that followed, Tate's confession shifted public opinion. Sympathy began to pour in for Aisha, and the media started questioning the source of the original article. It wasn't long before Temi's involvement was uncovered. Her calculated facade crumbled as her reputation was torn apart. The same media that had once praised her as Tate's perfect match now labeled her as a manipulative social climber. Temi fled Lagos, her dreams of wealth and power reduced to ashes. A new beginning. A month later, Aisha gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Tate was by her side throughout the delivery, his presence a constant source of support. Holding his son for the first time, he felt a wave of emotions he couldn't put into words: joy, love, and a renewed sense of purpose. I want to name him after my father, Tate said softly. Aisha smiled, her heart full despite everything they had been through. Tate Jr., she agreed. The weeks that followed were filled with healing and rebuilding. Tade and Aisha began to mend their relationship, taking things one step at a time. They were no longer the same people who had once hurt each other, but they were determined to create a better future, for themselves and for their son. On a quiet evening, Tade and Aisha sat on the balcony of their new home, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Their son slept peacefully in Aisha's arms, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. We've been through a lot, Aisha said softly. Tade nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But we made it. And we'll keep making it. As the stars shone above them, they knew their journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, they felt at peace. Together, they would face whatever came next, because now they had something worth fighting for. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.